Being pulled into the Black Legion begins with one harrowing instant of piercing insight. Abaddon, the despoiler's voice slithers into your thoughts like frost creeping along your bloodstream. I can still hear it echoing across the Eye of Terror, urging us to forsake our history and adopt his grand design. For 9,000 years, I'd toiled as a serf for the lunar wolves, observing their splendor dim into a grim obscurity. These days, my body sears as the warp reshapes it. Recollections fade away like soot dissolving in a stream, and my essence howls while frailty is etched from my core. Folks claim the Black Legion grants liberation from the gloom of deposed primarchs, yet what sort of liberty demands you relinquish every trace of your humanity? The brands etched into my skin aren't mere wounds. They're endorsements. I recall the moment my lord perished, not the actual event, but the one 10,000 years ago when the War Master tumbled on Terra. That demise is etched in annals of the past. I'm referring to the subsequent passing, the one I beheld firsthand. The instant Horus Lupercal truly evaporated from the stars. They warned that a serf must never gaze straight at his superior, that the splendor of the Astartes isn't meant for ordinary sight to fully absorb. Still, I'd been with the Legion prior to the downfall, before we escaped into the howling abyss humans dubbed the Eye of Terror. I mastered every ceremony, every custom. I'd burnished the identical suit of armor across 9 millennia, seeing the lunar wolves' golden sheen tarnish to a wan pallor as our mission decayed inside us. Once, I was Garen Vale, but identities hold scant value anymore. I came into the world on Terra amid the gloom of the Palace of Unity, back when the Imperium still harbored promise. Chosen for duty at 6 years old, my fingers judged ideal for the intricate task of tending power armor, slender digits, unwavering rhythm. The Legion's apothecaries refined me with subtle implants, sufficient to prolong my existence, yet not to lift me above menial bondage. A fractured eternity, harsher than outright oblivion. 9,000 years of service as I outlasted generations of fresher serfs who withered and perished while I persisted. My lord was Danter Saris, formerly a captain among the lunar wolves, eventually a chieftain gripped by fanatical loyalty to bygone eras. He wasn't alone in that. Once the War Master collapsed, the Legion splintered into raiding groups. Certain bands dove headlong into chaos's embrace, rampaging through the cosmos with their fresh autonomy. My lord's sort, however, stayed frozen in bereavement. They erected altars to Horus, hoarded artifacts from the ancient Legion, and longed for their lost progenitor's improbable comeback. Duration loses all sense within the eye. Eras blurred by, indistinguishable from hours or eons, at the warp's erratic mercy. Our band lingered in the husk of a majestic craft, the Vindication. In its prime during the Great Crusade, a noble warship, it now blended halfway into a demon world's terrain, perhaps wrecked, or maybe sprouting anchors, its steel frame melding with the jagged ground. From the bridge, my lord would peer into the warped skyline, seeking any omen. I sensed the growing disquiet rippling through the other serfs, the murmurs that our leader had forfeited his drive. The Astartes grew quieter year by year, their vows of reprisal against the emperor turning into empty ceremonies. We were withering, not physically, but in resolve. Then arrived the call to assemble. We sensed it prior to any sound, a weight pressing on the flesh, as if the atmosphere had thickened beyond endurance. The demon world quaked, its crystal spires fracturing over the vistas. I was buffing my lord's armor in the readying room when the initial surges struck. A mental surge so intense it toppled serfs and even made Astartes falter. Next came the voice, not uttered aloud, not audible through ears, but embedded directly in the psyche of every soul in our band. Sons of Horus, Luna Wolves, devotees of the toppled War Master, heed my words. The tone was profound, commanding, recognizable, yet altered. It wielded a dominance that allowed no defiance. My grip halted on the armor panel I'd been cleaning. Chills gripped me abruptly, ignoring the demon world swelter. I am Abaddon, initial captain of our ranks. The War Master has departed. The vision of the Great Crusade lies in ruins. The era of lamentation ends now. The mental transmission pressed on, resounding deeper in our spirits than in our senses. I observed my lord, the haughty Danter, drop to his knees amid the room. His features, typically rigid and serene, twisted with feelings I'd never glimpsed in him: fury, sorrow, and something darker, dread. The Legion, in the form you recognized, has perished, just as the 16th Legion expired with Horus. Yet I extend renewal to you. Discard the faint echo of yesteryears, scorch your frailties and hesitations, align with me, and together we'll craft a fresh legion, a black legion, unbound by paternal shortcomings or the shackles of heritage. We'll embody liberty unlike any in this universe. Liberty to seize the retribution once sworn, liberty to reduce the Imperium to ashes. The voice halted, and in that hush, I felt an alteration rippled through the core of our being, like reality itself deciding on a new path. This was my sole proposal. No further chances would come. Approach the wrathful phantom, bow down before me and emerge renewed, or stay confined to your altars honoring a fallen half-deity, destined to fade from the annals of time. Next, the coordinates seared into the consciousness of every pilot and forge master within the raiding force. The position of Abdon's capital ship, the vengeful spirit, the pulsing center of the ancient legion's might. My lord rose gradually, his plating groaning under the motion. Silently he pivoted and marched out of the hall. The other Astartes trailed after him, abandoning us serfs to the lingering resonance of Abdon's proclamation in our heads. What unfolded afterward unfolded with a velocity that mocked our eons of inertia. In mere hours, the whole contingent sprang into action. Assault capsules and assault craft were readied. Serfs hurried to collect artifacts and gear. I carried out my role, prepping my lord's battle kit, just as I'd done innumerable times in the past. Yet this time felt altered. His plating, which I'd kept in the faded green and white hues of the Luna Wolves, was being peeled away. Raw ceramite gleamed where vibrant markings once shone. "You'll join me, Garen," my lord declared, addressing me outright for the first time in ages. His tone rang empty, as if some vital essence had been excised from within. "Yes, lord," I answered, inclining my head per tradition. "Do you grasp the reason?" I paused. "A serf doesn't probe." "No, lord, because you recall," he continued. "You recall the dread. You recall the War Master. You recall our identity prior to the collapse. Your recollections bind you like shackles, Garen, just as they do me. Those statements eluded me at the moment. Clarity would arrive only when the blades were drawn. The passage via the warp proved ferocious, surpassing even the eye's typical fury. Our 5 vessels ripped across the immaterial realm like projectiles piercing tissue, trailing howling essences behind. The navigators succumbed to insanity sequentially, their tertiary visions weeping fluid as they steered toward the given points. Serfs were offered up to sustain our trajectory, their forms suspended from the control deck, crimson pooling over evolving scroll charts that shifted before our eyes. I stayed near my lord throughout the voyage. He'd insisted on my company, despite his sparse words. Rather, he passed hours gazing at his denuded armor, now and then tracing gauntleted digits over the exposed ceramite. One instance, I glimpsed him holding a vial of green pigment, on the verge of daubing it onto the pauldron before halting. He pulverized the container in his grip, the emerald fluid trickling along his glove akin to gore. "Suppose he's correct, Garen," he murmured without facing me. "Suppose we've been gripping a cadaver, much like the faithful grasp their cadaverous emperor." I held my tongue. It wasn't my role to respond. "I served him," my lord persisted. "I battled at the War Master's side when he still bore the name Luperon. I witnessed his splendor. How could I abandon that? How dare Abdon demand this from us?" Once more, I uttered not a sound. Yet inwardly, I noted that Abdon hadn't requested. He'd ordered, and my lord was already yielding. We burst from the warp into an unfamiliar sector of the eye. In this zone, the rules of nature asserted themselves more firmly, the warp's delirium restrained by a superior force, and floating in the emptiness ahead lay the vengeful spirit. Despite the passage of 10,000 years, I knew it instantly. The War Master's own command ship, the craft from which Horus had directed the uprising's armies. Time in the eye had warped it, as it warps everything there. Massive obsidian protrusions spiked from its frame. Glyphs that seared the gaze adorned its sides, yet its identity as the vengeful spirit was undeniable, its aura a rift in existence. Our voyage wasn't solitary. Scores of craft encircled the colossal warship, hulls displaying the emblems of every fractured offshoot of the 15th Legion, the Sons of Horus, the Luna Wolves, the True Sons, the Horus Reborn. A legion of raiding groups, each holding fast to their version of the War Master's inheritance, all heeding Abdon's summons. Our craft latched onto the cluster. As the hatch seals released, a tension mounted in my cranium, an entity probing my psyche. The vengeful spirit pulsed with vitality no starship ought to possess. It observed our intrusion into its form. Warriors clad in ebony armor greeted us, not the ashen green of the Sons of Horus, nor the pristine white of the Luna Wolves. Their plating was unadulterated black, edged in gold that devoured illumination instead of mirroring it. Their helms displayed no faction icons, no indicators of status or lineage, merely the eightfold star denoting undivided chaos. The Black Legion, Abdon's fresh forge, Decurion Saris among the obsidian-clad fighters intoned, his timbre warped by his visor. The despoiler expects you in the strategium. Your serfs shall be escorted to the arming vaults. My lord inclined his head, his own. My armor lay exposed and unadorned, devoid of its emerald or obsidian hues, like a blank slate ready for fresh markings. The serf in veil travels with me, my lord declared, motioning toward my position at his back. The ebony-clad fighter inclined his helm, scrutinizing me through unseen gaze. Every serf must undergo processing. Such is the despoiler's decree. Quote 7, my lord pressed. Quote 8, quote 9, the fighter countered. Quote 10. Before my lord could protest more, a pair of additional black-armored fighters advanced, flanking me on both sides. I offered no opposition. An existence steeped in submission forbids defiance. We will cross paths once more, Garin, my lord murmured as they escorted me into the shadows. They guided me along passageways that appeared to twist and pulse with life. The vengeful spirit's design felt more alive than engineered. Fellow serfs were being driven down identical routes. Scores of us, pulled from the diverse warbands that heeded Abdon's summons. A few shed tears without restraint, dreading the fate ahead. The rest advanced with the resigned calm typical of estate servants. No one attempted escape. Flight proved impossible amid terror's core. The readiness halls sprawled like immense sanctuaries, repurposed from bays that once deployed strike vessels. Vaulted heights vanished into gloom, sporadically lit by surges of power leaping over hidden devices. At the heart of the hall rose lines of steel slabs, each overseen by robed forms in deepest indigo, priests of the dark mechanicum, the tech apostates who abandoned the omnissiah for outlawed lore. They divided us by years and skills. The novice serfs, burdened with mere centuries of duty, were directed to the hall's edge. Veterans such as I, who had toiled since the Great Crusade, were directed to slabs right in the midst under the sputtering power bursts. They divested me of my garments, bearing my weathered frame to the hall's chill. My skin bore the scars of devotion, a web of faint enhancements implanted by legion apothecaries 10 millennia past, sustaining me well beyond mortal limits. The dark mechanicum priest inspecting me activated his mechadendrites with curiosity. Pre-heresy legion augmentation, he intoned, his tone merging mortal words with binary chatter. Scarce. Precious. Will they extract them? I inquired, my tone even amid dread. The priest emitted a noise akin to mirth. Extract. No serf. Upgraded. Refined. The despoiler demands retainers resilient to the change. Change. Yet he offered no reply. Rather, he applied a mechadendrite to my brow, and oblivion seized me. Consciousness returned amid agony. Not the keen slice of a blade or the sear of a seal, but a profound molecular torment. As if every particle in my form unraveled and reformed, I found myself bound to the steel slab, extremities fixed by restraints of an odd metal that fluctuated from rigid to fluid. Nearby, other serfs wailed, those still able to wail. Some bore sealed lips, stitched with wires glowing eerie hues. Others lay half dismantled, their vitals suspended in force fields adjacent as dark mechanicum priests probed their cores. The priest overseeing me detected my stirring awareness. his features hid mostly behind a breathing apparatus fringed with writhing tendrils that flexed as he vocalized. "The ancient inserts have integrated the fresh components," he stated, "not for my ears, but to a drifting servitor logging his observations. Subject displays exceptional synergy with the warp-tainted enhancements, probably from prolonged contact with immaterium forces in duty." I attempted words, but my mandible remained rigid. Metallic panels had fused to my jaw structure, linking to prior modifications. I sensed parallel alterations throughout my frame, novel inserts intertwining with the old, yielding a hybrid beyond pure flesh or mechanism. "You prove lucky, Serf," the priest went on, now speaking to me outright. "Your extended devotion has conditioned your tissue for the trials ahead. Countless perish in the initial stage, yet you, I suspect, shall persist to aid the Black Legion." He withdrew, exposing the alterations to my physique. My torso gaped open, buttressed by a lattice of shadowed alloy. My vitals throbbed with an eerie glow, echoing the wires muting the others. Most unsettling were my limbs, stretched longer and ending in fine metallic digits, suited for intricate labor on stasis armor. "The bodily upgrades mark merely the start," the priest explained. "The real shift follows now, the severing of bonds." He extended a limb upward, tweaking a device on the overhead apparatus. The power surges grew fiercer, converging into one ray that pierced my brow. Agony yielded to an entity far more dire. My recollections started flashing before me, not in the way I remembered them, but warped and tainted. I witnessed myself aiding the lunar wolves amid the Grand Crusade. Yet the triumph I'd once embraced turned into sheer dread. The worlds we'd subdued weren't freed. They were shackled. The fighters I'd idolized weren't champions, but fiends, slaughtering the helpless to amuse a deceitful emperor. I fought to dismiss these sights, certain they were fabrications, but the device dug further, targeting the roots of my devotion and eroding them. In every spot where my past held satisfaction in the Legion, it sowed uncertainty. Where affection for my overlords existed, it nurtured bitterness. Where belief in our mission thrived, it fostered despair. I lost track of how long this torment lasted. Chronology fades when your core self is being precisely dismantled. Bits and pieces linger in my mind. The shadowed mechanicum cleric swapping sections of my cerebrum with mechanical implants pulsing with chaotic power. Serfs nearby perishing as their psyches rebelled against the overhaul. The expanding void within, as my former identity, was systematically wiped out. Upon my release from the slab, I ceased being Garen Vale, devoted serf to the lunar wolves. That essence had been incinerated, abandoning just a hollow frame of tissue and circuitry, primed for fresh intent. The subsequent stage of our metamorphosis occurred in vaults buried inside the vengeful spirit, where the divide between physical and ethereal grew frailest. There, the Black Legion performed ceremonies to tether us to their agenda, not merely physically, but spiritually. We altered serfs were herded in batches of 20 into round rooms etched with runes that shifted, if not stared at squarely. Each space featured a Black Legionnaire at its heart, one of Abaddon's elite, clad in plating that absorbed illumination. The fighter in our area doffed his helm, exposing a visage once mortal, but now yielded to warp's caress. His flesh gleamed ghostly white, taut across traits flawlessly unnatural. His gaze was pure ebony, mirroring naught. "Quote 11, he declared, his tone echoing oddly through the space. Quote 12. He signaled, and from alcoves lining the walls stepped cloaked forms bearing obsidian blades. They wove through us, applying the edges to our brows, coaxing crimson that didn't trickle but suspended mid-air right before our sight. "Behold your history," Vorish intoned. Within the suspended crimson beads, scenes materialized. Me as a youth on Terra, my recruitment by the lunar wolves, the endless ages of obedience. But these scenes diverged from my recollections, twisted even beyond the dark mechanicum's contraptions. In them, I wasn't a faithful serf. I was a thrall, fractured and resentful, covertly despising my commanders while bowing to them. "This is the reality your vitae unveils," Vorish stated. "The bonds you've borne, the grudges you've concealed. Abaddon grants liberation from such deceptions. Forsake them. Forsake your history." "I forsake it," I heard myself utter, though I hadn't willed the words. The ceremony extracted them, drawn from the modifications already etched into my psyche. The cloaked ones advanced once more, this round incising our hands and gathering the viti into tiny ebony cups. They blended our essence with shadowy elixirs and grains that frothed and reeked upon mingling. Quote 17. Vorish demanded. Quote 18. The cup touched my mouth, the brew scorched like venom, ravaging my gullet and igniting my bloodstream. Nearby, fellow serfs crumpled, their frames writhing as the brew activated. Some perished outright, their shapes melting into frothing sludge. Others mutated, their mortal traits fading as corruption seized them. I stayed upright, despite every fiber howling in protest. The enhancements from the dark mechanicum reacted to the brew, merging it into my frame instead of succumbing. I sensed my awareness broadening, linking to a vast collective, a web of psyches, all linked to identical aims. Via this bond, I first perceived Abaddon, not face to face, nor as an intruder in my thoughts, but as a tidal force on my cognition, a void star dictating my renewed life's path. His intent wove subtly beneath mine, guiding without dictating, yet impossible to defy. Once the ceremony ended, just 7 from our 20 serfs endured. We transcended mere humanity, our bodies reshaped by machinery and warp essence. Our hides acquired a wan tint, akin to the shade of the Legion. The banners we once fought under now represented our renewal, not our downfall. Vor regarded us through his dark gaze, his harsh visage showing clear approval. "You've made it through the initial ordeals," he declared. "It's time to demonstrate your value. Come." They guided us out of the ceremonial hall into an enormous coliseum, formerly a key departure terminal. There, countless altered servants similar to us assembled in orderly formations, their transformed forms holding steady. In front rose a lofty platform where armored silhouettes in pitch-dark plating waited, the leaders of the Black Legion, overseers of Abdon's restructured army. Each carried gear and protective shells pulsing with sinister energy, rewards from the chaotic entities for those committed to the endless conflict. At the platform's heart, towering over these formidable fighters, loomed a seat carved from the remains of shattered dynasties. Seated there was a presence that commanded the entire space. His plating matched the rest in blackness, yet etched with golden patterns that writhed like luminous bugs over the ceramite surface. A vast mantle, seemingly stripped from living hides, draped his broad frame. But the most horrifying item was his blade, a weapon taller than any human, its edge shimmering with forces alien to our reality. Dracnian, the destroyer of realms, the demon blade of Abaddon the Despoiler. As he stood from his seat, every soul in the hall dropped to the ground, even the Black Legion's officers. I alone stayed upright, not from rebellion, but sheer astonishment. I'd beheld the War Master in his prime during those initial campaigns, observed Primarchs at their peak splendor. Yet Abaddon's aura differed, a force forged in torment and resolve, not the engineered flawlessness of the Emperor's offspring. He transcended Horus's lineage. He embodied the legacy of 10,000 years of bitterness. A armored fist seized my arm, pulling me low. Vorash made certain I displayed due reverence. My legs struck the floor painfully hard. "The era of readiness ends here." Abaddon's tone boomed over the assembled servants and fighters. It was the identical timbre that had lured us to the vengeful spirit, now manifesting physically instead of through mind link. Quote 22. He stepped down from the platform, weaving amid the prostrated crowd. Wherever he went, soldiers and servants dipped their heads further, none bold enough to lock eyes with him. Quote 23, he ordered. Quote 24. He halted in front of our cluster, his focus possibly snagged by my delayed submission. Up close, his dominance crushed the air. Beneath a warrior's braid of ebony locks, his countenance echoed Horus's, warped by 10 millennia of strife and loathing. His stare burned with infernal flames, portals to a spirit devoured by reprisal. Quote 25. He told us outright. Quote 26. He bent nearer, his words softening to a murmur that still reached all present. Quote 27. He drew back, speaking to the full assembly anew. Quote 28. With that, the massive portals of the departure terminal swung wide, exposing the warped chaos of the Eye of Terror past the vessel's energy barriers. Abruptly, the simulated pull of gravity vanished. Scores of servants, and a few Black Legionnaires too, hurtled toward the gap before backup barriers engaged, halting their rush but stranding them in weightless drift. "The frail shall be weeded out," Abaddon proclaimed amid the turmoil. "The resilient will endure." Vor clasped my limb, his augmented power holding me firm against the absent weight. "Your initial challenge," he stated. "Persist." He let go, and I floated toward the portals with many other enhanced servants. The barriers now in place weren't meant to shield, but to enclose a battleground where we'd vie to live on. In that null gravity void, the modifications from the Dark Mechanicum proved vital boons. My extended digits, capped with steel, let me seize the drifting wreckage cluttering the area. The grafts in my tissues adapted swiftly, recalibrating my motions for the missing force. The pull of artificial gravity vanished around me, leaving chaos in its wake. Fellow serfs faltered amid the turmoil. Those lacking deep cybernetic enhancements thrashed ineffectively. Several slammed into floating wreckage, suffering impalement or brutal compression. More floated toward the poised swords of Dark Legion warriors lurking at the debris zone's periphery, methodically harvesting the unfit with calculated efficiency. I gripped from one anchor to the next, dodging the most hazardous fragments. My thoughts, intertwined with the vengeful spirit's mechanical networks, allowed me to predict trajectories, granting vital moments of edge. I wasn't the only one blessed with such foresight. Other serfs who had endured the conversion process maneuvered through the disorder with growing synchronicity, adapting swiftly to their enhanced faculties. The ordeal stretched on for hours. Slowly, the serf count dwindled, felled by the lethal surroundings or slain by the vigilant guards. We remnants started coordinating on pure instinct, clustering into packs that boosted our shared prospects. Not from pity or allegiance, but from the stark math that alliance raised survival rates. When the hangar seals shut and weight returned, slamming us roughly onto the floor, roughly a third of us were left standing, or sprawled. We lingered in our collapse points, drained and irrevocably altered by the gauntlet. The remaining serfs eyed one another with fresh wariness, no longer as shared underlings, but as rivals, assets to exploit or threats to neutralize. Abdon, observing the whole ordeal from his lofty vantage, lowered himself again to speak to the victors. Quote 33. He declared, quote 34. With his command, Dark Legion troopers wove through our ranks, dividing us by standards beyond my grasp. I ended up with 11 others, 12 in total, all extensively modified, all veterans of endless duty. They guided us away from the embarkation area, into a confined room that echoed the ghost of some ancient reliquary. Shelves along the walls held exhibition pods, many barren, though a few cradled shards of plate or blades from the Great Crusade's heyday. At the room's heart waited my old lord, Decant Saris. His plating, once plain ceramite, now bore the inky hue of the Black Legion, accented by shining gold edges under the faint glow. He'd doffed his helm, exposing features I'd loyal served across ages. Yet they struck me as foreign now. The contours matched, but the gaze was otherworldly. What had once shown grim resolve now burned with zealous drive. Quote 35. He queried the warrior who'd brought us. Affirmative, Brother Saris, the 12 who recall. My former commander, no, Brother Saris of the Black Legion, appraised us through orbs devoid of familiarity. I recall too, he murmured after a pause. I recall triumphs that were illusions, winds that crumbled to dust, a war master who betrayed every dream. He signaled, and from alcoves encircling the space stepped additional Black Legionnaires, each clutching devices that blended blade and scalpel. Remembrance blocks renewal, Sarus intoned. As long as echoes of your past linger, you can't forge the future required. The Black Legionnaires advanced, applying the tools to our brows. A searing pain erupted as the probe pierced my cranium, then a chilling void crept across my psyche. I'll claim your recollections, Sarus vowed. Every identity you held, every cause you championed. and in exchange, I offered direction. The device delved further, and my awareness started to shatter. Recollections that had outlasted even the dark Mechanicum's overrides were ripped free, yanked from my depths like molars from bone. My youth on Terra, my drafting into the Luna Wolves, a fleeting sight of the Emperor amid a parade, the splendor of the Great Crusade, the atrocity of the heresy, the endless eons bound to a faction adrift without aim. As these were stripped, substitutes took root, not fabrications but reframings, implants sown in the void of my cleared consciousness, the Emperor recast as despot, Horus as a thwarted redeemer, Abaddon as the rightful successor to the eternal conflict, the Black Legion as the sole route to retribution. I resisted this assault, this overhaul of my essence, yet the prior alterations to flesh and soul had eroded my defenses. The dark Mechanicum's grafts, Vorash's sanguine rite, the Hanger ordeal, each had peeled back veils of my former being, priming me for this ultimate shift. My comrades faced the ritual sequentially. Some perished, their psyches crumbling under the strain. Others rose renewed, gazes hollow, faces calm with implanted conviction. I hovered in limbo, partially overwritten, yet clinging to fragments of self. Once the rite concluded, Cyrus drew near to me. He examined my visage with detached scrutiny, probing. He scanned the area, seeking traces of the serf who had once served under him. Quote 43. He inquired. I struggled to remember, yet the recollections were shattered and twisted. Quote 44. I replied, the phrase tasting unfamiliar in my mouth, back in the ancient legion. And what emotions do you hold for me these days? I examined my feelings, discovering they had shifted. The awe and terror I once harbored for the Astarte had given way to a chillier sentiment. Admiration for his strength lingered, but submission was gone. Nothing at all, my lord, I responded honestly. You fight as a soldier of the Black Legion, just as I will devote myself to the Black Legion. Our shared history holds no weight. Cyrus inclined his head, content with the reply. The purging wasn't total for you. Shards persist, yet they no longer bind like shackles. They're just faint whispers. He rested a palm on my shoulder, its pressure almost buckling my legs. Now decide, Garen Vale. Dedicate whatever's left of your essence to the Black Legion, or perish while clinging to your recollections. The option felt authentic, not some empty flourish. I sensed its gravity, a real crossroads amid the manipulation and reshaping. Maybe the ultimate trial to determine if I'd voluntarily release the remnants of who I was. I dropped to one knee before Cyrus, gaze lowered. I elect to pledge my service, I declared. The statement flowed without the internal pushback I'd anticipated. The alterations to my thoughts had proven effective. Then, stand, devotee of the shadows, Cyrus ordered. Your former existence concludes this day. A fresh mission ignites. I stood, experiencing an odd sense of relief. The load of countless ages' memories had been removed, clearing room for emerging intent to grow. I retained the name Garen Vale, but it had lost all significance. Now I was merely a container, prepared to hold Abaddon's directives. The concluding stage of our metamorphosis occurred deep within the wrathful essence, in rooms that had formerly housed the War Master himself. There, where the barrier between worlds grew frailest, we would link to the Black Legion not only through thought and form, but through spirit. The remaining serfs, reduced to fewer than 100, were led into an enormous round hall whose design challenged ordinary laws of space. Columns ascended toward a roof that appeared to enclose nothingness, with stars and cosmic clouds gleaming in its boundless expanse. The ground wasn't steel, but a mirroring dark material that undulated like fluid, even as it bore our steps. At the room's heart, a ring of Black Legion warriors formed, each wielding a rod crowned by the 8-spoked emblem of chaos undivided. They intoned in a tongue that clawed at the senses and psyche, their tones weaving shapes in the atmosphere that twisted like animated forms. Inside their formation loomed Abaddon the Despoiler. He had shed his plate, exposing a physique sculpted by 10 millennia of conflict. His hide formed a lattice of wounds and warp stains, everyone narrating a clash or alliance. The talon of Horus, His notorious lightning talon stayed grafted to his left limb. The gilded alloy appeared to blend into his tissue at the joint. Draconian, his demon blade, thrust into the fluid ground ahead of him, its edge throbbing with ravenous glow. The ultimate forging. Abaddon's tone echoed through the space. The creation of the Black Legion endures. Which of you will tie yourselves to our cause? Which will endure the endless crusade? We will obey. The gathered serfs chorused together, our tones merging in eerie unison. The declaration emerged without prompting, drawn forth by the ongoing ceremony. Abaddon sliced a dark blade over his hand. Ebon ichor surged from the cut. Essence of the Legion, he intoned, letting the fluid fall onto the fluid base. Upon contact, it sizzled and smoked, designs radiating like ice-veining window panes. Tissue of the Legion. Abaddon pressed on, ripping a band of flesh from his arm without a wince. He flung it into the expanding web, where it melted away, the motifs devouring it and evolving into greater intricacy. Spirit of the Legion. Abaddon lifted Draconian from the ground, the edge dragging strands of the viscous layer. He rotated the sword, aligning its tip against his torso directly over the heart. Briefly, I believed he intended a climactic self-offering. Rather, he applied pressure sufficient to release blood, which streamed along the steel in purposeful trails defying mere descent. Through essence, tissue, and spirit, I seal you to the Black Legion, Abaddon proclaimed. Not as thralls, but as tools of ruin. Not as followers, but as agents of retribution. The fetters of fealty to fallen lords lie shattered. Forge bonds anew, bonds you select yourselves, bonds that anchor you to our intent. The dark fluid underfoot surged upward. Filaments of the obsidian material coiled around our limbs, icy as the vacuum's frost against our hides. Wherever it met skin, it scorched, etching motifs into our bodies that mirrored those blooming from Abaddon's offering. The sigil of the Black Legion, Vorash murmured at my side, his words heavy with profound reverence. The despoiler's own contact. The agony was sublime, surpassing any torment I'd endured across my extended lifespan. It delved deeper than mere bodily hurt, piercing straight to the essence of my existence. I sensed my spirit etched with identical motifs that scarred my skin, forging a connection to the Black Legion more profound than simple allegiance or submission. Nearby, fellow serfs cried out or crumpled, their forms and psyches crumbling under the ceremony's strain. The ebony vines devoured such weaklings completely, erasing them without trace, not even residue, an offering to seal the pact for those resilient enough to endure. I stayed upright, despite every urge urging collapse. The modifications from the shadowed mechanicum pulsed with vigor, siphoning force from the chaotic energies flooding the hall. My reshaped consciousness handled the torment, isolating it, channeling it as energy instead of letting it drown me. As the rite built to its peak, Abaddon lifted Draconian aloft, the sword now slick with blended blood, his mingled with ours. The Legion is renewed, he declared, freed from heritage or lineage, united by resolve and intent. The Black Legion ascends, let the stars quake. The ring of Black Legionnaires slammed their rods against the ground together, unleashing a surge of force across the space. The fluid ground hardened in moments, its designs locking in place, mirroring those seared into our bodies and essences. Fewer than 30 serfs lingered on their feet once the ceremony ended. We had transformed in ways both essential and eternal. Our hides displayed the obsidian markings of our oath, evident under the skin like veins of shadowed alloy threading through ashen tissue. Our gazes mirrored the ravenous glow shining from Draconian, our spirits no longer fully our own. You are no longer serfs, Abaddon told us. You are the tethered, the tools by which the Black Legion imposes its command. You will safeguard our arms, care for our plate, chronicle our triumphs, and observe our rise. And when we at last triumph over the remains of the impostor emperor, you will document his final gasp. He motioned to the Black Legionnaires who had overseen the rite, escort them to their roles. The groundwork for our initial crusade starts immediately. We were guided from the ceremony hall, our elevated position evident in the Legionnaires' handling of us. Not quite honor, but an acceptance of our rank within the Black Legion's order. We had shifted from disposable aids to essential components, prolongations of Abaddon's directives. I received placement in the arsenal, my enhanced grip ideal for tending to battle equipment. The foundries aboard the Vengeful Spirit sprawled as enormous networks, merging age-old smithing with warp sorcery and forbidden mechanicum ingenuity. In these depths, the Black Legion's plating and blades were preserved, mended, and upgraded. My initial assignment involved readying suits for the fighters from my old master's host. Their faded verdant and ivory insignias were being methodically stripped away, supplanted by the inky black and fiery gold of the Black Legion. I toiled beside fellow tethered ones, our actions aligned through the faint link we now held via our tie to Abaddon. Duration warped oddly in the eye of terror, even more so inside the Vengeful Spirit. Spans that felt like weeks could stretch to days or swell into months. We labored ceaselessly. Our enhanced frames needed scant repose, our modified thoughts locked onto our assignments alone. The furnaces never dimmed, the labor never halted. The Black Legion geared up for conflict. In these periods, I glimpsed my prior lord, now Brother Sarus of the Black Legion. He ignored me as an individual, viewing me merely as one among the tethered. The bond from eons of devotion had snapped, supplanted by our fresh positions in Abaddon's structure. This might have disturbed me once, yet the stripping of my recollections had stripped away most of the sentiment from our tie. One shift, distinguished only by a change in assignments rather than real temporal flow, brought a summons from the forges. A Black Legionnaire, his armor designating him as part of Abaddon's elite Ezekarian, the despoiler's closest cadre, arrived at the arsenal. "You!" He jabbed a rune-etched gauntlet toward me. "Garen Vale, the despoiler demands your aid." I laid down the plasma incinerator I'd been fine-tuning and trailed him without hesitation. The oath ceremony guaranteed obedience, though even absent it, intrigue would have driven me. Personal attendance on Abaddon marked a rare privilege among the tethered. I was conducted through unfamiliar reaches of the Vengeful Spirit, rooms where existence felt especially fragile, where murmurs trailed our steps and shades shifted without illumination. The further we pressed, the more the ship evoked a living organism. It felt alive, more a breathing entity than some lifeless assembly of steel and circuits. At last, we arrived at a fortified portal watched over by a pair of Terminators clad in ebony plating so cumbersome it defied belief that they could stir. Their headgear mimicked infernal countenances, grinning visages with spiraling horns and razor teeth that seemed to warp depending on your vantage point. In their grips were halberds humming with power that scorched lingering trails across the atmosphere. Quote 45. My escort declared to them. The Terminators scanned me through their crimson-glowing visors, then parted in flawless synchronization. Beyond them, the portal slid open, exposing a sanctum that challenged all reason. It resembled a command nexus, dominated by a vast round dais in the middle that beamed holographic maps of stellar clusters and armada deployments. Yet the machinery intertwined flawlessly with vital tissues that throbbed with vitality. The bulkheads hosted what resembled cogitators, except these respired and sporadically winked with orbs that emerged and faded within their casings. Circling the dais were potent and terrifying presences, commanders of the Black Legion, battle lords who had clashed through 10 millennia of endless conflict, mages whose plate bore runes that seared the psyche if stared at too long, fighters whose forms had been warped or gifted by chaotic forces, amplifying their superhuman prowess even further. And presiding over them all, commanding awe through sheer aura, sat Abaddon the Despoiler, encased in full Terminator armor that towered over his augmented kin. Drachnian rested in its scabbard by his hip, though the blade's sinister aura pressed relentlessly on every spirit present. Quote 46. Abaddon observed, his tone cutting through the low hum of talk from his officers. Quote 47. I advanced, inclining my head in deference as custom required. Even if we bound ones weren't serfs in the old way, we upheld rituals of homage to the higher ranks, especially to the Despoiler. You've stood with the Legion since the Terror, Abaddon declared. It wasn't an inquiry, yet I affirmed it anyway. Quote 49. Once more, declarations rather than queries, truths he already grasped. Quote 50. I echoed. Quote 51. This demanded real reflection. I sifted through my splintered thoughts, noting how the rituals I'd endured had reshaped them, given them new frames. Loyalty, Lord, I replied. The echoes of what happened endure, but their essence has shifted. I recognize the Emperor as no god, just mighty. Horus as a pawn discarded once spent, the real course ahead with the Black Legion. With you. Abaddon regarded me, his fiery stare drilling past skin and skeleton to probe my essence. Satisfied with whatever he uncovered, he nodded. The bound utter honesty, fabricated or not, he remarked to his lieutenants, not me. This one will act as the Legion's archive, a chronicler of our rise who's also seen our nadir. Via his gaze, the stars will behold the certainty of our dominance. He focused on me once more. You'll chronicle our wars, each triumph, each reversal, each stride toward Terra, not as mere rhetoric, but as evidence. The Black Legion's reality, penned by one who recalls the prelude. I dipped lower in obeisance. I am privileged, Lord. Privilege suits the faithful, Abaddon brushed off. You obey out of necessity. Your essence is tethered to me as tightly as your body to the Legion. Yet, in obedience, you'll claim the liberty once vowed, release from history's deceptions. He signaled a nearby sorcerer, one whose gear featured parchments of tanned flesh etched with tiny glyphs. Karnas will equip you for the duty. As the Terminus Crusade ignites, join my inner circle. Observe. Document. Guarantee the Black Legion's revival echoes eternally. That ended my audience with the despoiler. The sorcerer Karnas guided me out of the war room into his quarters aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Contrary to the ship's bizarre fusion of biotech and engines elsewhere, Karnas's area struck a stark, methodical note. Racks of volumes and parchments crammed the room, each locked in stasis barriers that flickered with safeguarding forces. The despoiler discerns promise in you, Karnas intoned, his words warped through the helmet's vocalizer. Quote 4. Quote 65. Millennia. Quote 66. Loyalty isn't the tradie prizes, Karns shot back. It's your ability to reframe things. You don't just swallow the fresh doctrine we've implanted in you. Instead, you weave it together with the remnants that linger, forming a tale that aligns with our goals far more effectively than total brainwashing could. He approached a locked enclosure, placing his armored palm on a surface that verified him with a beam of nauseating emerald glow. The enclosure slid open, exposing artifacts that hummed with energy even to my dulled perceptions. These will serve as your instruments, Karnas declared, extracting them sequentially. The initial one was a tome encased in what looked like ceramite, its surface plain except for the 8-pointed star of chaos undivided. The Liber Tenebris, Karns clarified. Its sheets are made from the psychic-sensitive hide of astropaths. Whatever you inscribe inside it will endure beyond time and the warp's corruption. Then he produced a pen carved from an unfamiliar substance. Dark as the abyss, yet shimmering faintly with colors that danced in motion, shaped from the solidified essence of a demon prince, Karns explained. It will tap into your vital force as you scribe, anchoring your script to existence via offering. At last, he offered a band of ebony alloy that throbbed with concealed radiance. This will sharpen your awareness, enabling you to view occurrences from various angles at once, to capture not only the occurrences themselves, but the significance underneath, the threads of destiny weaving through each conflict. I received every piece with due solemnity, realizing they transcended simple implements. They embodied the Black Legion's intent, channels for enacting my transformed role. When do we set out? I inquired, stowing the objects in the garments provided to me as a thrall. The assembly is underway, Karns answered. The factions pledged to the despoiler are converging right now. Before long, the Black Legion will unleash its inaugural assault as a cohesive army. The Terminus Crusade will proclaim our resurgence to a cosmos that believed us vanquished. Over the ensuing days, I observed the assembly of what evolved into the galaxy's most dreaded martial power. Clans of ex-sons of Horus converged on the Vengeful Spirit, their fighters enduring the identical alterations I'd seen in my previous Lord's unit. Additional legions joined too. Renegades who recognized in Abaddon a commander deserving their devotion, word-bearers bearing their shadowed creed, iron warriors offering their mastery of sieges, night lords excelling in fear's domain, even elements from the Death Guard and Thousand Sons whose ties to their primarchs might have faltered. Each participated in the ceremonies that would tether them to the Black Legion. Each discarded their former banners and symbols for the obsidian, black, and fiery gold of Abaddon's reformed host. Each shattered the bonds of history and hammered fresh ones, links of volition over legacy. I chronicled everything in the liber, the pen siphoning crimson from my digits as I penned, the band granting insight into the deeper import of happenings. I catalogued the Black Legion's creation with the detachment of someone mostly stripped of feelings, yet informed by recollections of prior eras. As the Armada ultimately launched from the Vengeful Spirit, escaping the Eye of Terror sector where Abaddon had rallied his troops, I positioned myself on the viewing platform of the Despoiler's command vessel. The band at my throat let me glimpse the immaterium amid the ship's shift, the churning insanity of the warp extending ravenous filaments to stroke the hulls bold enough to cross it. At my side was Brother Saras, formerly my overseer, reduced now to merely another soldier in the Black Legion. He, too, observed the passage, his face concealed by his helm, though his stance hinted at eagerness. He queried abruptly, eyes averted from me. The remark caught me off guard. Personal probes like that were uncommon in the Black Legion, where history was intentionally erased. Shards, I confessed, echoes more than full recollections, awareness of incidents devoid of sentiment. Fine, Sarus remarked. That's how it ought to be. I hold no memory of my old identity, just fleeting glimpses, like glimpses from a stranger's existence. It's preferable thus. Still, you posed the query, I observed. A portion of you yearns for ties to what was. Saras faced me then, his helm's oculars blazing with internal flame. Not ties, but proof. Certainty that the fetters are fully severed, that confronting the Imperium will bring no doubt, no residual affection for our old allegiance. There won't be, I vowed. The right of binding ensured as much. Our loyalty lies with the Black Legion now, the long war, the despoiler. Sarus inclined his head sharply, then gazed back at the portal. Note it down, Archivist. Note that we. When the time arrived, we pressed forward without hesitation. We welcomed the shadows. And I followed suit, incorporating his declarations into the expanding record housed in the Liber Tenebris. A record chronicling a legion resurrected not by genetic lineage or Primarch's decree, but by sheer determination and intent. A legion liberated from historical shortcomings, bound together in its commitment to retribution against the Imperium of man. The Terminum Crusade marked the Black Legion's bold declaration to the stars. It consisted of brutal incursions targeting Imperial planets along the edges of the former Segmentum Obscurus, worlds that had enjoyed uneasy tranquility for thousands of years, their fortifications ignored owing to their remoteness from the Eye of Terror. We burst from the warp into the Terminum system, comprising 7 populated planets circling a fading sun. The system offered scant resistance, its planetary defense forces armed with obsolete gear, its space stations manned by backups instead of full-time Navy crews. It proved ideal quarry for a legion aiming to gain traction via conquest. The Black Legion assaulted with no prelude or pity. Deployment capsules and attack ships deployed from our ships prior to any Imperial alert. Terminators materialized straight into control hubs, butchering commanders before defenses could form. Sorcerers invoked warp tempests that cut off the system from possible aid. I joined the leadership team under Karnas, the sorcerer who had supplied my scribe's implements. From a gunship suspended over Terminum Prime's main metropolis, I observed the systematic devastation unleashed by the Black Legion. Structures crumbled beneath barrage cannons, avenues flowed with gore as non-combatants were funneled into massive containment facilities. The governor's stronghold became a shrine to the chaotic entities, its towers now decorated with the skinned remains of its prior residents. Amid the chaos, I documented everything. The stylus extracted blood from my hands as I inscribed, the offering anchoring my account to truth, guaranteeing that my observations endured in vivid detail. The band encircling my throat enabled visions past the material realm, revealing flows of destiny and the dark deity's focus as they fixed upon this inaugural endeavor of their renewed devotees. The Black Legion battled not like a disorganized horde of factions, but as a cohesive army. The ceremonies that had linked us, that had crafted fresh bonds of loyalty, demonstrated their value in combat. Fighters, once loyal to varied legions and primarchs, now battled as kin, fused by common goals and Abdon's resolve. By the invasion's third day, Terminum Prime lay fully subdued. The Black Legion standards draped every pinnacle and turret, the 8-pointed star declaring the planet's fresh overlords. The inhabitants faced extermination or bondage, the ablest and most apt drawn into sects that would supply foot soldiers for the Legion's human supporters. At that point, Abdon descended to the surface. The despoiler had stayed on the vengeful spirit through the opening strike, overseeing the wider operations spanning the system. With success secured, he arrived to seize his achievement firsthand. I positioned myself with the elite escort awaiting his Thunderhawk's arrival on the scorched assembly field outside the governor's stronghold. The Black Legion soldiers dropped to their knees in unison as Abdon stepped out, his Terminator plate rendering him colossal even among the enhanced Astartians. Dracneon was unsheathed and poised, tip first at his feet, the demon blade absorbing the anguish permeating the subjugated planet. "Rise, warriors of the Black Legion," Abdon ordered. "Rise and behold the initial harvest of our renewal." The Black Legionnaires rose, their plates still scarred from clashes, yet their stance defiant. They had validated their right to the heraldry they bore. They had shattered old shackles and hammered new ones, links of triumph over loss. Abdon climbed the citadel stairs, now a sanctum of obscurity, and faced his legion along with their human followers. I edged nearer, the collar throbbing as it sharpened my perceptions to seize each utterance and motion for the annals. Quote, 72. Abdon's tone boomed over the assembly, unnaturally resonant without aid. Evidence that the endless conflict persists, that the Imperium's transgressions remain unpunished, that reprisal approaches the pretender emperor world by world. He lifted Dracneon, the edge glowing with eerie radiance that stretched his silhouette over the whole square. The sons of Horus perished with the War Master. The Luna Wolves fell at Istvan. But the Black Legion arises here, amid flame and slaughter. Arises from decision, not gene seed. Arises from resolve, not Primarch. We are the successors of wrath, the bearers of the unending strife, and our retribution shall not be refused. The soldiers of the Legion bellowed their assent, their voices reverberating through the devastated urban sprawl. The human devotees flung themselves to the ground, overwhelmed by the aura of their shadowed savior, while I documented every detail, my hands dripping blood onto the sheets of the Libris as the quill raced across them with otherworldly haste. Once the speech ended, Abdon stepped down from the temple's stairs and walked through the ranks of his fighters, honoring their triumphs and forging their devotion through direct affirmation. He finally reached my position, where I held the Liber extended before me, its leaves marked by my own blood and brimming with my account. Quote 75, he ordered. I offered the volume, displaying it for his review. Abdon examined the entries, his fiery stare sweeping over the script I had inscribed. A pleased grin appeared on his face, evident under the top knot of dark locks. Quote 76, he remarked. Quote 77, quote 778, I responded. Quote 79, quote 80 Todi. Abdon countered. Quote 81, 1. He extended his right arm, the one spared Horus's claw, and brushed the sheet where I had been noting. His gauntleted digit emerged smeared with my blood, which he then smeared across his brow, etching a red sigil between his eyes. Blood unites us, he declared, not the essence of gene seed or primarchs, the blood we lose, the blood we pour out, the blood we dedicate to the eternal struggle. Keep that in mind, scribe, and etch it for those who come after. I will, Lord, I vowed, appending his declaration to the record right as the words left his lips. Abdon gave a single nod, then pivoted toward Karnas, who had drawn near amid our conversation. "Ready the ceremonies. This planet will serve as our initial tribute, a proclamation of purpose that even the sightless prophets of Tzeentch can't overlook." Karnas inclined his head low. "It will be arranged, despoiler. The alignments are already being carved, the victims assembled." Their intent eluded me at that moment, but I would shortly behold the deeper aim of the Terminus Crusade. Far beyond mere domination or looting, it was something profoundly weightier, a message inscribed in the script of horrors that the Imperium was bound to grasp. In the ensuing days, the Black Legion solidified its grip on the Terminus system. Lingering opposition fell under systematic annihilation. The inhabitants were either herded into servitude or offered up in massive rites that painted the heavens with gore and spirits. And, underlying it all, a grander enchantment began to form. Karnas and his sorceress brethren oversaw the etching of enormous glyphs spanning the face of every subjugated planet. Ditches brimming with promethium and sacrificial remains created designs discernible from space. 8-pointed stars in various arcane forms whose significance eluded my augmented senses. I chronicled everything, my insight sharpening as the ritual's design unfolded. This was destined to be an oblation of cosmic proportions. 7 planets pledged to the corrupt gods, their annihilation a signal flare proclaiming the Black Legion's rise to forces both earthly and celestial. On the last day, I positioned myself beside Abdon once again as he surveyed the central rite from the command deck of the Vengeful Spirit. The immense ship had descended into close orbit above Terminus Prime, its silhouette plunging the tainted orb into profounder gloom. "Observe, scribe," Abdon directed. "Observe and document the genuine genesis of the Black Legion." With his cue, Karnas and his assembly of warlocks launched the closing invocation. From high above, I watched the ground markings blaze to life, flaring with unearthly fervor. The fires raced through the designated furrows, connecting the sacred zones over landmasses and seas. Comparable infernos burst forth on the system's other 6 planets, appearing as distant specks of wicked radiance. The Vengeful Spirit's bridge dimmed as its mechanisms channeled energy to empower the rite. Abdon remained steadfast, Drachnian unsheathed and gripped in his grasp. The demon blade absorbed the surging forces coursing through the area. The Black Legion troops encircling him dropped to their knees in reverence, their plate vibrating with the mounting force. Then arrived the climax. Karnas lifted his rod, now radiating an intensity that nearly devoured the mage himself, and slammed it down with devastating resolve. The strike unleashed a warp shock through the Empyrean that even my muted awareness could detect. Terminus Prime's crust split as the ceremony hit its zenith. Vast chasms tore open worldwide, exposing not a seething interior, but a horror infinitely worse. The chaotic essence of the warp surged forth, devouring all in its path. The remaining planets in the Terminum system met equally grim ends, each perishing in a distinct torment dictated by the malevolent force that seized its offering. Within a single hour, 7 populated worlds twisted into demon realms, their essences irrevocably warped by the ceremony. The Terminum system ceased to belong to the physical cosmos in any real way. It had merged into the Eye of Terror, a festering scar on existence that defied closure. "It is finished," Abaddon proclaimed, sliding Drachnian back into its scabbard. "With the rite's completion, the shackles of history lie shattered at last. The Black Legion rises anew." He faced me directly, his searing eyes boring into my soul's depths. Quote 91. I inscribed his decree in the Liber Tenebris, crimson ink from my punctured hand staining the vellum, yet leaving the script pristine. The torque encircling my throat seared against my flesh, funneling visions beyond human grasp into etchings I alone could capture. As our armada withdrew from the freshly corrupted demon worlds of the Terminum system, I returned to the viewport once more. The device granted me sight of the disturbances our deeds had stirred in the Empyrean. Primordial horrors and dread entities now turned their gaze upon the Black Legion with heightened curiosity. Brother Cyrus approached me anew, his plate adorned with fresh commendations from the recent strife. Quote 92. He inquired. Quote 93. I pondered his words with deliberation, viewed through the prism of my reshaped awareness, forged by the purge of my former recollections, and the right that lashed my essence to the Black Legion's cause. I recognized the rationale, the imperative. Indeed, I replied. The Luna Wolves lacked the resolve for such an act. The sons of Horus would have faltered under their Primarch's lingering specter. Only in severing those bonds could the Black Legion emerge. And your own bonds, scribe, are they sundered? He pressed. You, selected to preserve what we all discarded. His query cut to the heart of my paradox. As the Legion's archivist, I embodied its history, even as history opposed renewal, tied to documenting yesteryear while the host fled it. Quote 98. I concluded. Quote 99. Cyrus inclined his head, appearing content. Quote 100. Quote 101. I murmured, the notion materializing in the Liber Tenebris as I voiced it. Quote 2. Cyrus affirmed. As the vengeful spirit plunged anew into the warp, bearing the triumphant Black Legion toward its forthcoming conquests, I contemplated Ceres's insight. It rang true from one angle. The outlook etched into my remade psyche, that of one who bartered identity for direction. I traced the torque at my throat, sensing the thrum of captive forces within. The band that sharpened my senses, yet chained me to the Black Legion's command. Yet another riddle. Yet another fetter masked as emancipation. What lingers of Garin Vale? The question arises in lulls between offensives, when the Torquay's grip loosens faintly. The faithful retainer who burnished the identical harness across 9,000 years, yearning for meaning that eluded him. Has that self vanished utterly, devoured by the rites that birthed the Black Legion's scribe? Or persists a sliver, entombed under strata of indoctrination and warp sorcery? The answer eludes me. Perhaps relevance escapes it. Selfhood binds like iron. As Abaddon imparts, remembrance weakens. The sole verity counts, the long war, and my duty to chronicle it for ages hence. Still, as I commit these reflections to the Liber Tenebris, I sense the chronicle itself weaves fresh bindings, a link to discarded yesterdays the Black Legion vows to forsake. Maybe therein lies my essence, not just to document, but to safeguard that in its fervor to shatter old yokes, the Legion recalls the roots of its wrath, the bedrock of its reprisal. Liberty within the Black Legion demands the forfeiture of all that once defined one's mortal essence. My own humanity faded away ages ago, offered up in the ceremonies that chained me to Abaddon's command. Yet through that yielding, I've acquired a vision that stretches across countless ages. I've observed the demise of a single legion and the emergence of its successor. I've watched soldiers who once pledged fealty to a divine ruler now bow to one from their ranks. I've chronicled the evolution of resentment from individual wrongs to an unending holy war. Such is the essence of induction into the Black Legion, to be dismantled and reshaped anew, to relinquish your former self for a higher calling, to shatter the bonds of history, only to craft fresh ones by deliberate intent, to discover emancipation in yielding to a mission that eclipses any single soul. I am Garin Vale, formerly a serf among the Lunar Wolves, presently the scribe of the Black Legion. The etchings upon my skin are no mere wounds, they serve as endorsements. Endorsements from the hands that reconstructed me, that severed my old restraints and tempered new ones, that instilled meaning amid utter despair. And as the Black Legion presses on in its endless conflict against the imperium of man, I will stand ready to observe, to document, to guarantee that upon our ultimate triumph over the remains of the impostor emperor, the annals of time will reveal the reality of our renewal, the reality of our retribution, the reality of our liberation. This stands as the declaration of Garin Vale, scribe of the Black Legion. May every soul who encounters these lines grasp the cost of authentic freedom, the relinquishment of identity, the rupture of shackles, the acceptance of the void.